Welcome everyone to Dropkick DiSKussions presented by Sportskeeda. I'm your host Korey Gunz along with Sportskeeda's wrestling expert Tom Colohue. Tom, are you ready to talk some wrestling this week?
I am. It's been a bit of a light week wrestling-wise despite all the hours, so I'm excited to at least get some conversation out of it, talk to a few people because I'm sat in my home all day, so I might as well talk to someone. It's either you or talk to the nearest wall, and I'm so glad to have you instead of having a brick wall.
Yeah, I'd say, even talking to you, once or twice a week, I probably still talk to you more often than some of my other friends that are in a lot closer proximity to me. I know that for sure. Not halfway across the world, so I'm still talking to you more often than I do them right now.
Yeah, it's amazing. A lot of the people we work with, Rick over at ESPN, I talk with him pretty much every day, and yet I haven't seen my sister in 4 weeks.
Yeah, it's crazy times we're living in for sure. We'll start tonight, talking about crazy times. How's this for an opening topic? Is the WWE for sale? There are reports this week that the WWE may have had some discussions, at least, about selling the company to either Fox or maybe ESPN. I'm not sure I can ever really envision a world, Tom, in which Vince McMahon doesn't control the WWE, but what can you tell us about this situation, and what do you make of all this chatter this past week about the WWE possibly being up for sale?
Well, the intention for about a year now from Vince McMahon has been to essentially leave Raw and SmackDown in the charge of the executive producers, originally Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff. Obviously, that's now changed to Bruce Pritchard. And then NXT, of course, with Triple H's baby, and then step back. But when it comes to actually relinquishing control, I've always suspected the same thing. I suspect Vince McMahon will probably die in that chair before he lets it go. This is a man who loves his job that much and loves what he's doing that much. When it comes to how he intends to use the WWE going forwards, the story was, or at least the tweet that came out, was that it was being sold to Fox and ESPN. That's confusing to me because I don't believe those companies are in the market for WWE, especially right now when there is so much wrestling content that they are buying and bringing in to keep everything afloat, and the WWE is making record profits largely because of that. The WWE is making non-stop money. It is not for sale. I have checked with everyone I possibly could. There is no talk of a sale. What I think this is just confusion because there has been talk for a long time now that became official in January that the WWE Network content is for sale, more specifically the pay-per-view rights. That's not the whole of the WWE. Vince doesn't want to sell unless he gets an offer that's so big he simply can't ignore it. The company is supposed to go to Shane, to Stephanie, and by extension to Triple H. That's his plan at the moment.
Now, if someone was, maybe a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, and sees these reports this week about the WWE being for sale, or that they're having these secret discussions with Fox and ESPN about selling the company, there are maybe some things that people might try to put together and kind of read the tea leaves and say, well, because of this, this, and this, that points to the fact that, the company may be in trouble, or that, reasons why they may be looking to sell, especially in today's environment with the coronavirus epidemic and such. So I want to just touch on some of those with you, and probably more than likely have you debunk a lot of those things, but just kind of touch on some of the reasons why someone might think that, Vince McMahon might actually be entertaining the idea of selling his company. First, let's talk about the TV ratings. Everybody wants to talk about ratings every Monday, every Wednesday, every Friday. People tweet them out. On Wednesdays especially, they want to compare NXT to AEW. And we have seen the ratings on a decline. A lot of times they are hitting some record lows for the time being. And, of course, you can, again, point to the COVID-19 pandemic as probably a reason about why this may be happening. But talk to me a little bit just about the declining ratings themselves. What is the WWE's reaction to that been? What has been some of their sponsors, and like the Fox Network, for example? What has their response been? So talk to us a little bit about the ratings and maybe why they aren't an indicator of the company, as a whole being in trouble.
The ratings as they are now are purely live ratings. There's no numbers dedicated for after affects people who've recorded it, people who are watching on catch-up, people who are watching on YouTube, people who are watching stuff like The Bump on Instagram and everything live they've got there. There are so many numbers we're not aware of and so many ways to make money beyond live TV. Now, obviously, this is a factor for USA Network and Fox Network, but they keep throwing massive numbers at the WWE, despite the fact that record low numbers are consistent every year this time of year. Every single year, we have record low numbers at this time, and every single year, fans and wrestling journalists all over the place go absolutely mental, decrying at the end of all things. It's really not. It's not even close. And when people start to panic too much, we get things like the wild card rule, which was not a result of the ratings, it was a result of the fan reaction to the ratings. That's why you get stuff like the wild card rule. If you stay calm, you stay level, you don't get stuff like that. That's one of the reasons that I think people need to at least be aware of what happens, because every year we have this exact same problem, and yet they keep posting record numbers, they keep getting record numbers in from the networks, and there have been a lot of meetings. The WWE have had digital meetings with the USA Network and with Fox. Vince McMahon's been quite open about this. They've had those meetings. The networks are expecting the low numbers, but what else do they have to broadcast? Even if it crashed, even if we went down to less than 1 million for each one, it's not like they can show football.
It's interesting that you touched on, the numbers being low, and if we can go back and compare year to year, the ratings really are pretty consistent. We kind of expect this dip every year. But I do want to ask, and not to make light of the situation, but considering the COVID-19 pandemic, everybody's quarantined, not a lot of people leaving their homes, not really a whole lot of other stuff to do. Would it be right for TV executives to be a little bit disappointed with the numbers, thinking, why aren't more people than average watching the WWE, considering that there's really not anything else for people to be doing other than sitting at home and watching television?
I think that's fair, that there should be an expectation that people will be watching more TV if everyone's locked in their homes. That's an absolutely fair comment. There are some forms of media in which that is absolutely working out. But I think you've got to consider how often you see TV broadcasts which mention the pandemic, which bring it back to you, which bring everything back to you. The most popular form of media that I'm aware of right now is a game called Animal Crossing. I don't know if you're aware of this, but everything I hear from so many people I know is about a little island that someone has built on Animal Crossing, away from everything, where everyone's a little animal. I'm so confused by the appeal of it, but it gets you away from everything. That's what's working at the minute. So when you look at your TV shows, the WWE now looks entirely different to what it did before this. So you have to be aware of that as well, that you are looking at a reminder of everything that is going on outside your doors. They are aware of that. That is part of the conversation that's taken place.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look into that. I can't say I've heard of Animal Crossing. I'm going to have to maybe get myself hip to that one.
You'll fall down a rabbit hole, man. You be careful. You be careful.
Well, let me bring up another red flag that some people might point to. The WWE Network seems to be soon. We've heard it reported for a while, but it seems like that it's coming, but maybe we just don't really know when, that they're going to move to a tiered pricing guide. Right now it's $9.99. You get the network and everything that it involves. Now reports are that they're going to be moving to a tiered pricing level where for a certain amount of money a month you get this much percentage of the content, and then so on and so forth, to where the top level you get everything that the WWE Network has to offer. A lot of people might point to that as a money grab for the WWE, that, hey, they need a way to generate more revenue, so they're going to start charging people more if they want the full gamut and programming of the WWE Network. What can you tell us about that?
The WWE are always very open that they are there to make money, and as much money as possible. This is one of the reasons they're looking to sell the pay-per-view rights. And they've been talking for years about tiers in the WWE Network. Years for tiers. Anyway, One of the things you look at when they are talking about this in particular, they are trying to lay out many different tiers, and they need to know exactly what content will be on each one. The top tier undoubtedly is going to be pay-per-views. They will sell pay-per-views to outside distributors, but you will still be able to access them through the network by the top tier, which will be moderately expensive compared to the rest. You get a lot of value from the WWE Network, but in addition to trying to get more money, when you take that content and put it on other channels to other distributors, you get more exposure. The WWE as a business prides exposure as the forefront of everything else. It's why you get much less copyright strikes. It's why they don't shut GIFs down when they're on Twitter and the like. Whereas, for example, New Japan have shut down people posting clips. They are there for the exposure. The sale of the WWE Network is with that in mind as much as making money. So I wouldn't say it decries in any way the end or a company in trouble, because the network has made quite a lot of money for this company, and they are looking at ways, of course, this being an example, of how to make more money from it in future.
All right, then. Well, then tell me about this. You tell me the WWE's not in trouble. It also got announced that there will be no WWE 2K video game. You know, there was a WWE 2K20 that came out last year. 2K21 should be the follow-up. They've announced that they have killed plans to make that game. There will be no 2K release for this upcoming year. Not a red flag?
Not a red flag. That decision was made by 2K Games. And the reason they made that decision is because, and I'm sure you're aware of this one, 2K20 was the worst received wrestling game that I think has ever been released.
I did hear that, yes.
Yeah, did you hear that one? Yeah. It was so badly received that they are worried about long-term reputation damage to them as a company. They knew pretty much from the first day they had to drastically change direction, which is why we're now looking at their replacement, WWE Battlegrounds, which will be more arcade. If you get a bug that sends you flying around the ring and unable to get in a ring, or you fall through the floor in an arcade game, that's endearing. So at least you'll have a little bit more in that. It's a little bit more low tech, a little bit more anime style. Your expectations will be lower. That's the idea here. They can also hopefully create something quite fun. I just hope the GM mode, so we see plenty of it on up, down, down, and on multiplayer mode. I would love to take this onto Twitch.
Yeah, I'm sure Xavier Woods would have a field day with this if they can actually get something that is enjoyable to play.
I'm sure he'll have a field day with it no matter what. Bless him, he tried so hard to play 2K21. He tried so hard to be positive. 2K20, my mistake. He's tried so hard to be positive, and then he stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, when the New Day power of positivity can't even get you over the hump, it probably tells you all you need to know about that game.
Absolutely. It was, and I want to say this as politely as possible, aware of all the positives, it was a train wreck.
Well, so there you have it, folks. The WWE is not for sale. It is not in trouble. Everybody can put those worries to rest, thanks to Tom and his reporting. But one thing that has been sold is the WWE stock in Cain Velasquez. Velasquez this week was released from the company. There was a time back in the fall where it seemed, for better or worse, Velasquez was going to play a major role in the WWE's plans moving forward, and now they've just completely cut bait with him. What can you tell us about this situation and some of the reasons behind Velasquez's complete release from the company?
Well, it's a real shame that we have to move from the WWE is doing great to talking about releases, which is, of course, one of the reasons why the WWE are doing great.
Right.
Oh, yeah. With Cain Velasquez, this is, I think, not that big a surprise for a lot of people. He hadn't appeared since the Saudi Arabia show in which he lost to Brock Lesnar in very short order. And he, as we've mentioned on here quite a bit, he rubbed people very strongly the wrong way. He didn't say about his initial injury when he signed his contract. He said he was going to be at the Royal Rumble when that hadn't been announced, and so he was pulled. He posted a picture of himself and Ronda Rousey at WWE HQ when nobody was supposed to know they were there. He unfortunately just made a catalogue of errors early on. Now, this release happened a couple of weeks ago, similar to but not at the same time as the initial batch of releases, and it wasn't announced because they wanted to avoid potential mainstream attention. They believed that the initial releases, despite the number of them, wouldn't breach that mainstream level because it wasn't like they were releasing a Roman Reigns or a Seth Rollins. Also, it's very possible that Cain Velasquez has been furloughed, but I am aware that he did get a payout, which suggests to me that he was released. It could be that he's been furloughed and still being paid, but at the minute, it's been suggested to me that he has been released pretty much straight away after the initial ones. We may see him back in the company. He was training well. There were people who were really trying to support him and felt he had a lot of potential, but we are where we are. They decided to cut some costs. He was a major cost for precious little return, so they cut their corner.
This may be a little bit off the beaten path, but, like you mentioned, back at the Saudi Arabia show in the fall, and also around the time of SmackDown debuting on Fox, he played a pretty big role. He came in kind of as the backup for Rey Mysterio, against Brock Lesnar. He had the match with Lesnar at Saudi Arabia, and we had heard reports that maybe they were, going to move forward with some type of feud with that. There were, some people thought that he may be the favorite to win the Royal Rumble, to then go face Lesnar, at WrestleMania. Obviously, that didn't happen. Are there any ripple effects to this for Rey Mysterio or even his son Dominic? Because, like I said, they seem to play a real central role in his storyline for bringing him in, and at the time, his angle with Brock Lesnar. So were there any plans moving forward that maybe the fact that he wasn't ready to be in the ring, even when they put him in the ring with Lesnar, so they kind of pulled him out of that storyline pretty quick, and then now he's been completely released? Were there maybe some plans in the works involving him and Rey Mysterio and Dominic that kind of got put on the shelf as well?
No. With Rey Mysterio wasn't there for any sort of long-term storyline with Cain Velasquez. He was there to give that initial boost to popularity by saying to Rey Mysterio fans, oh hey, this guy's good too, you should all support him. One of the reasons Rey, of course, was using that role is because of his longevity and also the diversity of fandom that he manages to bring in. With the nationality and the style of like high flying, he brings in a lot of fans that the WWE doesn't necessarily automatically cater for, which is why they always try and have certain people like a cruiserweight division. They were pushing Andrade for a while as the next big Hispanic wrestler and so on and so forth. When it comes to Dominic, I'm not sure. There's been so much back and forward. People were very excited to see Dominic in a wrestling ring. And here we are, and it still hasn't happened. It's very confusing to me that we are where we are. Brock Lesnar at the minute, they're building him... Well, they're not building him because he's not on TV. They're building Bobby Lashley towards Brock Lesnar. He will be back eventually, but Cain Velasquez will not be involved with Brock Lesnar going forwards. There was a plan for a storyline going into WrestleMania that has been completely abandoned. Drew McIntyre was chosen instead. Honestly, I'm not sure Drew McIntyre would have been chosen in that place if Cain Velasquez had still been there. Drew McIntyre fans can count themselves lucky. Cain Velasquez fans can count themselves unlucky.
Gosh, I mean, to think about what could have been, I would think most people would think that probably worked out for the better, with Drew McIntyre being in that spot. But, can you imagine where we might be right now if, Cain Velasquez was the WWE champion?
That was a real popular thought in WWE headquarters for a long time.
Now, between this whole situation with Cain Velasquez has shaken down, and then you also look at things like Ronda Rousey's recent comments, which a lot of people haven't really been able to decide for sure if it was a shoot comment or a kayfabe comment whenever she talked about wrestling being fake and some of her remarks about some of the women wrestlers in the WWE. Have any of these situations kind of soured the WWE a little bit on bringing in these MMA fighters and trying to turn them into quote-unquote sports entertainers?
A little bit. There has definitely been a little bit of souring. I want to look at Ronda Rousey as a perfect example because it's not just what she says, there is more high-profile exposing of the business, because the WWE announced that Ronda Rousey signed a 3-year contract. She wrestled for a year. She hasn't been seen now in more than a year. What the hell kind of contract can it be if she can take a third of it off minimum and still be on contract? That's exposing the business, because it's very obvious she's not on a 3-year contract. Otherwise, where the hell is she? Cain Velasquez, same situation, signed a contract, wrestled a match, should have been there for a number of more years, and simply was not there. They can't tack any more time onto the end of those contracts, because these contracts are very different from the ones that the WWE wrestlers have been signing. Everyone is on a different contract in this company, but people who have experience and who have agents and who have negotiators will get much better contracts and have much more leveraging power. Wrestlers need to sort of follow their lead right now and get contracts that are more to that style. We'll see how that goes going forwards. When it comes to other MMA fighters, we are going to see more. They're not going to ignore that potential revenue stream, but they will definitely think a lot harder before they do it next time.
Let's turn our attention over to this past Monday night's edition of Monday Night Raw. We talked last week about the apparently sudden push of Apollo Crews that he was receiving on Raw. He qualified for the Money in the Bank ladder match. But then this week, it looks like that may be for naught, as he was taken out of the match, quote-unquote, due to injury. Is this just a case of the writers on Raw kind of giving his character a little bit more time to connect with the crowd, maybe build up a little bit of sympathy for him before just kind of thrusting him into such a prime spot like competing in the Money in the Bank ladder match and being looked at as a guy that could challenge for the WWE Championship or the Universal Championship?
Very possible. I think it's very likely. It's a kayfabe injury. It's not a real injury.
Right.
But he was taken out of the match. They knew that was going to happen beforehand. So before they filmed this, they, of course, had the match. So they knew it was coming. They knew that it was planned. So it was definitely written ahead of time. It does get more sympathy for the character. And with Apollo Crews, the concern has never been his wrestling. He's a very talented performer. The issue was always that character, actually connecting with an audience. This adds to it. You think back to how many times they tease people going all the way to the promised land, as it were, and pulling it back. Daniel Bryan, when he beat John Cena at SummerSlam and then immediately got pedigreed and had a briefcase cashed in on him. These are things that make people care. And I think with Apollo Crews, they are working at a negative because he's had so long on the main roster without doing much, but they've done very good in a very short space of time. It's disappointing to me that he won't be in the Money in the Bank ladder match, but we also have to be realistic and ask certain questions about maybe there is a niggling injury that he could perform through, but maybe needed surgery. Maybe he's going into a period of self-quarantine and won't be seen for a couple of weeks. So they decided to do this. Maybe they found out quite late on that he's never been in a ladder match and is a little bit afraid of heights. Which, if you're going to be on the top of corporate headquarters also climbing a ladder, I think is a fair comment.
Yeah, absolutely. No thanks on my end, but more power to the guys and gals that are going to be doing that for sure. Now, you mentioned, and we've talked about on the show before, that the Money in the Bank match has already been taped. It's happened. It's in the can. It's ready to go. And like you said, it was taped without Apollo Crews in it. They knew this beforehand. So in the span of 2 weeks, we saw a guy qualify for the match and then be taken out of the match. With a pre-taped main event like this, like a Money in the Bank ladder match, are you surprised that there haven't been really any spoilers that I've seen come out from the match as far as not only just who might win the match, but even the participants? Because like I said, as of last week, Apollo Crews was in. Now he's out, but they taped the match already knowing he was going to be out, but it seemed to take everybody else still by surprise. So, are you surprised that we haven't seen more spoilers coming out from a lot of these pre-taped cinematic matches and events that we've become a little bit more accustomed to?
I was initially surprised. obviously last week I was able to give some information because I'd been reaching out to people. And after seeing Apollo Crews' quote-unquote injury, I reached out to those same people and said, okay, so you guys didn't tell me everything then. And it's fair in so many ways. It's fair because obviously they knew I was going to report it. Now, there's many ways in which they've been reducing spoilers. There really is a skeleton crew working on it at the minute. They are limiting the amount of production staff who will be involved. But you also have to ask certain questions, and this is a positive. The WWE locker room was aware that Edge was coming back at the Royal Rumble as far back as Hell in a Cell in October. Knowing that, they chose not to say anything for 4 months to make sure that there would be a lot of excitement. Now, this is obviously a much smaller thing in the grand scheme of things, Apollo Crews being out and somebody being in, but it does add that little bit of excitement. So I get why they might want to keep it to themselves. When news of Edge being in the Royal Rumble got out, a lot of the wrestlers were very unhappy with each other, trying to work out who had spoken. So I think there's been some subtle reminders that maybe you shouldn't be talking to journalists about this. Some people have chosen to take it on board. I completely respect that.
Who do you think will be the name that replaces Crews in the match? I'm not going to ask you who will replace him because I know that you like to keep the show spoiler-free, so I'm not going to, just directly ask you if you know who is going to replace him, but just Tom Colohue as a fan, who do you think would make the most sense to replace Crews, or just who would you like to see kind of given the opportunity to, to shine in a match like this and maybe move themselves up the card a little bit?
The one who makes the most sense for me, storyline-wise, would be Austin Theory. I know Andrade is one who is likely to be in the match. It would be a good representation of the United States Championship. But they have announced that there will be a last chance gauntlet match, and Austin Theory is someone who has already tried to compete. He's also a high flyer, he's very athletic, and he's a heel. So he suits that down to the ground for me. I think he's a very likely replacement. Who I would like to see, and who I think would add the most to the match, is Samoa Joe.
That would definitely be interesting. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
that's interesting you bring up Theory. My first thought after seeing Raw was, okay, well, Andrade is going to be the guy to replace Crews, and then maybe Crews returns at the Money in the Bank match and costs Andrade the match in some way, and then bang, you've got a nice little U.S. title feud going forward between the two. But Theory wouldn't be a bad choice, and if he does get that spot, I mean, man, we talked about this last week on the show. I don't think there's a guy that has been thrust onto the scene and just, quite frankly, due to just some dumb luck, has seen his stock rise and been put into a more of a prime position right from the get-go than Austin Theory.
I completely agree. The same could be said of Angel Garza, of course. You could also take that slot for the same reasons. It's certainly an exciting debut for someone who's been there for such a short amount of time, and I think that's one of the reasons I think he would be very good in this spot.
Another noteworthy thing that happened on Raw was the in-ring return of former WWE Champion Jinder Mahal. And if you didn't know he was a former WWE Champion, if you watched Raw, for the love of God, what else were you doing? If there's one thing that you could have taken from this Monday's Raw, it was the fact that Jinder Mahal was a former WWE Champion. I think obviously, he's probably a very needed addition to the heel side of things on Raw, don't you think? I mean, especially I know Seth Rollins is getting the title match at Money in the Bank with Drew, but, you've reported that there may be some rumblings that Rollins, along with Becky Lynch, may be taking some time off together here soon. We talked about that the Zelina Vega faction has really been a focus of Raw in the past couple weeks, really up to a month and a half. But, those guys, at some point are probably going to need some reinforcements, not in their faction, but just on the heel side of things as far as being the top heels week after week on Raw. So Jinder Mahal, you think a good addition, a needed addition to the heel side of things over on the Red brand?
I would say so. Someone like former WWE Champion Jinder Mahal does add quite a bit to the heel side. He's someone that they can push very easily, and he's someone that's very easy to get heel heat on. Because if there's one thing Jinder Mahal proved, it's that all you need to be a top heel is to be pushed hard. The man was hated because of the idea that he didn't deserve his spot, which is fair enough because I've had so many people saying he didn't pay his dues. He hadn't gone through the whole thing, but he did perform very well in the role he was given. I've got to say, he was fantastic at gaining heat, and even though he famously did go a little too far at times, he certainly honed his craft and really notched it up in that time. You mentioned about Rollins taking time off. That is something that seems likely in the future. I did mention that Becky Lynch was due to take time off after WrestleMania. Of the 4 Monday Night Raws that have happened since WrestleMania, she appeared in only one, which may have been pre-recorded. So, hard to say that she hasn't, I'll say that. She's definitely taking some time off right now. Seth has only appeared twice so far of those 4 as well, so people are being spread a little thinner. He's someone that I definitely expect to be taking time off as well soon. And yeah, it's Raw's very thin on the ground, both heel and face at the minute. There is a very small amount of people in that locker room. They're doing the best they can with them. They're very, very grateful for Aleister Black right now, I'll tell you that much. But with Lashley so far apart from everyone else, they need a few more heels who can do things. And Lashley's not going to get built up too strong if they can't do that. It's a shame that certain people have been released when they have, because now would be a perfect time to push Eric Rowan.
Yeah, I'll debate people all day that Jinder Mahal was a good WWE champion. I don't care what anybody says as far as, him being kind of pushed to the moon and all that. His character for what they needed, and at that time on SmackDown, I thought he made for a really good heel champion.
I completely agree. And I think there's a lot of examples of this. When Triple H first became the WWE Champion, WWF as it was then, he was hated for being pushed too hard and for not being deserving of his chances. Look at the man now. Mm-hmm. Imagine what's going to happen the day that Baron Corbin becomes champion, because Baron Corbin has been ready for that championship for about 2 years now. He's going to be hated. He's a heel. He's supposed to be.
So is Jinder, you think, the heir apparent as Drew McIntyre's next title challenger once this feud with Rollins is over? Do you think he's the next guy that they're grooming to kind of take that next spot as his next challenger?
Definitely, yeah. The WWE Champion by nature has a lot of sort of booking power as to who they want to work with. Now, Seth Rollins is someone who's there to establish Drew further after Brock Lesnar, a big name to beat. Fair enough. However, Drew then has some options, and there are limited options available right now, but of those options, he's able to make some choices. I've said before, I'm very excited to see McIntyre versus Lashley. I think Lashley might be a very good next WWE champion as an option. But in addition to that, when you look at the current WWE champion, who better to face him than a former WWE champion like Seth Rollins? Who better than a former WWE champion like Jinder Mahal? He's a former WWE champion, Jinder Mahal.
I've heard that.
Have you heard that?
I've heard some rumblings about that.
I felt I should drive it home just in case. I think that's what they were saying up there.
Now, in addition to him being a former WWE champion, if they do move forward with a feud with McIntyre, obviously they've got the 3MB history to kind of play off of between those two. But if they do that, I cannot believe that they are going to move forward with this feud and not have Heath Slater not only not a part of the angle, but not even a part of the company anymore.
When Drew McIntyre re-debuted on Raw, I was ecstatic knowing that all three of 3MB were on the same brand, and I was waiting. I was waiting for anything involving Heath Slater and Drew McIntyre. I was waiting for anything involving all three of them. Why didn't it happen? Why? Surely this has got to be one of the biggest missed opportunities in history. I don't know why they didn't do it then, but the chance is gone now. Obviously, they didn't see any money in it, so they wouldn't do it. But I think we can say for certain Heath Slater's cheering both of his friends on.
Maybe they bring him back. Maybe they could, kind of hop on the bandwagon and just, even if it's just for a little limited run, maybe bring him back for a couple shots. Or, with the way they pre-tape things, hey, bring him in for a weekend, tape 4 weeks worth of Raw, get a 3MB triple threat in the can, and then, give him a nice little payday and send him on his way. Probably should only take him 2 or 3 days.
That's certainly possible, and I think they could do that within the no-compete clause and then, give him some work without affecting that. And I think what you said there is a great way to do it. Once Rollins has been seen off, we then see McIntyre lining up against Jinder Mahal. Heath Slater gets involved. You have that triple threat. Drew beats Heath, and Jinder Mahal gets that moment where he's outside the ring, glaring and scary and grrr, before a big pay-per-view match. I think that could really work out well. But I unfortunately don't see it happening because they really don't want to, and this is a direct quote, they don't want to go backwards. I was asking about Drake Maverick. I was asking about Sarah Logan. And they said they don't want them appearing on the show, at least yet, because they don't want to be seen to be going backwards.
What do you think about the habit of WWE lately of these announced returns? Like with Jinder Mahal, it wasn't a surprise. He didn't come out and attack someone or attack Drew McIntyre. It was just before they went to commercial break, they said, hey, coming up next, Jinder Mahal returns. And then here he is, he wins his match, kind of a squash match, move on. Especially in these times where you're having to put shows that are pre-taped, so you've got time to kind of think about how you want things to play out, when you want things to happen. Wouldn't it make more sense to make his return a surprise and kind of give people a reason to say, hey, even though these are pre-taped shows, you still need to be watching, still things happen that are surprises and kind of off the cuff instead of just, hey, this guy's returning. And I get it when they do it with guys like The Rock or Batista, because they want to get as many viewers on the show, so they tell you beforehand that, hey, this guy's going to be coming back or this guy's going to be on the show. But no disrespect to Jinder, but I don't really necessarily put his return on the same plane as if The Rock or CM Punk were coming back onto Raw.
A number of WWE producers are of the opinion that there is no point doing any sort of run-in or surprise like that when there's no crowd. Jinder Mahal would definitely get a reaction if he did that from a crowd. It wouldn't be a good reaction, it'd be a very, very bad reaction, and that would be fantastic. But you can't get any reaction if there's no crowd. So they are doing this instead. Jinder Mahal does have a lot of following in India and the Indian markets. So with them working on the Indian TV deal, that is something that that may grab people in that manner. However, as you say, Jinder Mahal, unfortunately, not a particularly strong draw outside of that market. It's confusing to me a little bit, but I get what they're saying about there not being much reaction from a crowd if there's no crowd.
Yeah, but to me, if you have no live crowd, then your crowd is the people at home. So you could still kind of pop the people watching on TV by doing something surprising and doing something that they're not expecting. I know it's, I don't know if there's a right or wrong, but just to me, that seems like a lame excuse to say, well, since there's no live crowd, we're not going to try to do anything exciting or surprising. We're just going to announce everything beforehand because there's nobody in the arena, so what's the point? To me, that's, I don't maybe not go as far as say a slap in the face to fans, but as me watching at home, like I would like to see something surprising or that I'm not expecting on an episode of Raw every once in a while instead of being told beforehand that here's what's going to happen.
I get what you're saying. It felt like a bit of a cop-out to me when they said it, but it's an awkward one. I don't entirely understand their reasoning for putting people out there and announcing them beforehand when you could have that surprise. But obviously with ratings as they are at the minute, they have to be aware of people changing channels. They are trying at the minute to be a lot more wrestling orientated. This has been going on since Hell in a Cell and has been ramping up recently. They want it to be focused on in-ring product. So maybe there's something about that in there. I'm not sure.
Last thing I'll ask you about before we wrap up tonight, we talked about Jinder Mahal maybe being a guy, fresh face to come in and maybe be the next challenger for the WWE Universal Championship, or WWE Championship, excuse me, on Raw. With the shows being pre-taped, do you think that we'll kind of see a shifting, kind of a sliding in and out of a group of wrestlers from month to month, maybe after one pay-per-view, for example, Money in the Bank is over? You know, we've talked about that people like the Zelina Vega faction, the Street Profits, you know, people like that have been major parts of Raw for the past couple months now, that maybe once we kind of hit the crescendo of a pay-per-view, some of those people maybe slid out of the picture. You bring a new crew into the Performance Center. They're there taping, you know, multiple weeks, sets of tapings for Raw. And, you know, you kind of have, you know, a Group 1, Group 2, Group 3, and kind of shuffle people in and out to try to keep the product fresh? Or do you think that we're going to just pretty much see the same consistent group of men and women on Raw, and people like a Kevin Owens, or, you know, people that we haven't seen for a while, or maybe we'll just have to wait until more of this pandemic stuff is kind of sorted out before we start to see them on Raw more often?
This is a bit of an awkward time when it comes to wrestling in the WWE, because you will always have sort of the top tier limited. So we've talked before about Randy Orton has some pre-booked time off. AJ Styles had some pre-booked time off. We're not seeing quite a few people at the moment. Kevin Owens isn't available. Seth Rollins is likely going to be taking some time off. And then there's been a number of releases. So no Rusev on Raw, no Gallows and Anderson, no Ryder, no Hawkins, and so on and so forth. They've skimmed a lot off the top, and they've skimmed a lot off, I hesitate to say it, but ultimately the bottom. So what we have now is a lot of focus on certain people, and they can do that. We will see some rotation. I'd imagine certain people will fall out of favour a little bit. They're under a lot of pressure to push as many people as possible. But when Styles comes back, we may see someone taken off TV for a little bit. Someone like Austin Theory, for example. You may see no more Austin Theory matches for a couple of weeks. And then we'll see Orton come back, and maybe we'll see Orton versus Owens as a feud, and that will get a lot of attention. And then we won't see as much of Apollo Crews, or Rey Mysterio might take some time off. There is a lot of rotation going on right now that's out of the WWE's hands. However, there is a limit to that. We are going to see people coming back after Money in the Bank. We are going to see things ramp up. We're going to see the return, Owens, Styles, Orton, and the like. And in addition to that, some of the part-timers who are missing right now, like Lesnar, like Edge, who falls in that category as well, like The Undertaker, we may see or hear more from them as we start to build towards SummerSlam. So there'll be a lot of rotation in the coming weeks, but once we start to get towards the summer, it'll be the same as it used to be, with the big names on top, and then some of these guys hopefully getting over now while they can. Apollo Crews is someone I'm worried about going forwards. Ruby Riott as well, with the way she was beaten very conclusively. I worry we won't see too much of her. And the women's side have also got Becky Lynch coming back as well. So there will definitely be some rotation. It'll start to get top heavy again. And at that point, we may start to see less of people like Street Profits Bianca Belair.
It'll definitely be interesting to see how everything shakes out. And, you know, the road to SummerSlam and the build-up to the summer months is always exciting. So I'm sure we'll see more of the same as we get closer to that event in August. We want to thank everybody again for joining us this week and listening to the show. Please make sure that you like and comment on this week's video, and also subscribe to the Sportskeeda YouTube channel. While you're there, you can also subscribe to Tom's personal YouTube channel as well if you want to get even more wrestling news and notes from him and get his thoughts on what's going on in the world of wrestling. You can follow Tom on Twitter at Colohue, and you can follow me at Korey Gunz if you like. And make sure that you check out Sportskeeda.com for the latest wrestling news and articles. We thank you again for joining us this week, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of Dropkick DiSKussions.